Mr. Speaker.
I call Andrew Bailey.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to be talking on the Minimum Wage Contractor Remuneration Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, just the backdrop to this bill, which is before the House. This is obviously a bill that's been put forward by the Labor government some time ago under the Darren Fenton bill, which was actually put forward but actually rejected by the House. And this is now a rewrite of that original proposed bill by Darren Fenton. And today what we're doing is having another go at trying to introduce similar provisions. And I think we've got to ask ourselves, what are we actually trying to achieve? I've just heard the previous member just talk about trying to deal with exploitation, and I think all of us agree that no one wants to see exploitation take place in New Zealand with regard to New Zealand workers doing a proper job. But it's also a question about choice, a choice about the way people want to work and the relationship that they want to have with their employer. And I think that's a fundamental tenet that we need to have a very close conversation around, because choice is something that permeates everything that we want to do, and provided we're not getting to a point of exploitation, that is a legitimate, in fact, fundamental right of everyone in New Zealand. And the third thing is around risk and reward. And what is adequate risk and reward for doing a proper day's work? And I think this, again, this minimum bill, wage bill, is sort of starting to cut across a lot of those original propositions. And that's why we're not supporting this proposed bill. But one of the things I just want to pick up on is that if I look at the bill, if you go to Schedule 2, which really lists all the different services that would be caught under this bill, quite wide-ranging, and we had a number of presentations of different industry players and workers on a number of the related industries listed here. For instance, cleaning services, courier services, fast catering, fast food delivery, right through to truck driving services, telemarketing services, newspaper and pamphlet delivery services, just to name but a few of the different companies who came and gave us very thoughtful presentations on this bill. And I think, you know, when you look at some of those, particularly around the courier industry, and we had a number of submissions in that industry, where this is the one around risk and reward. We had certain operators who were saying that they very much liked the arrangement of being able to be an independent contractor. That was their choice, and they saw that was adequate risk and reward. And they just didn't actually have a view around exploitation. So in that case, you had the contractor voluntarily wishing to enter into these arrangements and actually finding them very satisfactory. On the other side, we had a company, a very reputable company, making similar representations that they found these arrangements perfectly acceptable and preferred, and it doesn't actually preclude the arrangements of actually employing employees, but for that model it worked very well. The other one, which was the most obvious industry where this level of exploitation is perceived to occur, is the newspaper delivery service. And again, we had some presentations of that to our select committee. And again, this is the issue that I think people have got to consider a little bit further. Companies want to make sure that they get good value for money from their employees, and employees want to be paid adequately for doing a proper day's work. And so, how do you measure that? And so, in many industries, it's appropriate to actually set targets about what sort of outcomes you want to achieve during the course of the day. And delivery of newspapers is one such case. And particularly in that industry, it was providing jobs to many disadvantaged people, particularly people with disabilities, younger people, and older people who would not otherwise find getting employment easily, or we're in a situation of wanting to take full-time employment. And so entering into a contractual relationship in that case was actually perfectly feasible and acceptable to all concerned. I think the issue around cleanliness services is another area which a lot of debate about, are we allowing these people to work late at night, endlessly doing jobs and not getting paid a suitable remuneration. So I think the one point I wanted to say, and the member from ACT noted it earlier, no one wants to see anyone exploited. No one wants to see anyone being underpaid for what they do. But the right to have a conversation and enter into a voluntary relationship with an employer, but with a contractor, is perfectly legitimate. And even as a professional contractor, many of the times I've seen and witnessed where professionals determine what they are going to incur in doing a job, whether it's writing a report or providing some form of advice, and subsequently finding that they overrun that time estimate and therefore will exceed the agreed budget they've entered into with the contracting firm. That is, in a sense of a contract. It's a contract between two parties who have all the information and make a willing decision, and it's almost a willing buyer situation. And that is a perfectly legitimate circumstances. And if we took this act to extreme, we would be even suggesting those professional relationships involving highly skilled people, we would seek to renegotiate them if, for instance, we found that their overall rate was less than the minimum wage. And I just think that's fundamentally wrong. I think the right for people to enter into proper arrangements is fair and reasonable and equitable and should be provided for. We do not want every person to be a contractor. We certainly want to see employment arrangements continue in that regard. But that flexibility is one I think is a very strong issue that we need to maintain in our employment relations. I do want to just add that as a government, we've been very focused on making sure that we stop some of the less attractive and unwanted practices that have been occurring. And I note particularly how we banned zero-hour contracts, where employers do not guarantee any hours of work. I think that's a fundamental change and a very important one that this government's brought into play. We've also sought about increasing the minimum wage, and I'm glad that the government has progressively increased the minimum wage from $12 back in 2008, now up to currently $15.25. And the issue is, can we get there quicker? Should we be imposing a higher minimum wage, which many have advocated? But I think for the many thousands of business owners out there, there's about 500,000 small businesses in New Zealand, the owners of those businesses, the shareholders of those businesses would be concerned that we're not doing that in too fast a progression. And what we've said about doing it is in a logical way that means people can budget, and at the same time, all New Zealanders can share from that upside as we progressively increase minimum wages. And we've also extended parental paid leave, reduced ACC quite significantly, a reduction of $232 million for ACC cuts. And I think all those things go together to make the work environment that we currently have in New Zealand far more robust and appropriate for New Zealand circumstances. The last thing I just want to hone in on, Mr. Speaker, is actually the cost of this proposal, which I don't think many people have actually thought about. I just want to lay out a comparison between the minimum wage and what it means to a salaried employee versus a contractor. Now, an employee would be paid 8% of their gross earnings as holiday pay on top of their wages, and ACC levy would be deducted through the PAY system, as we all know. If we were to adopt this with regard to a contractor receiving a similar amount of remuneration, and let's say that's a minimum wage, would not receive holiday pay, but would have to pay both the earners and work levies, and the levy rate varies according to the employment sector, ranging from 10 cents in the dollar to several dollars per $100 of liable earnings. So actually, what this means, excluding tax consideration, the contractor would be approximately 9% worse off for a week than an employee. And I think that's one of the financial constraints we should really think about when we talk about this bill. So, Mr. Speaker, on those grounds, I oppose this bill.